I first noticed something was wrong when James started taking his phone to the bathroom. 15 years of marriage and suddenly he needed digital company while showering? The change was subtle, like most betrayals are at first. A password on his phone that hadn't been there before. Late nights at the office that grew more frequent. The slight flinch when I walked up behind him while he texted. All these little moments collected in the corners of my mind, gathering dust until they became impossible to ignore. We met in college, chemistry lab partners thrown together by alphabetical seating, Bennett and Collins. I dropped a beaker on our first day, and he cleaned it up without a word of judgment. That kindness was what I fell in love with, the way he'd leave coffee by my bed during finals week, how he remembered my mother's birthday when even I sometimes forgot, the gentle way he held our daughter Emily when she was born, like she was made of glass and wishes. But something had shifted these past few months. The James who came home now felt like a stranger wearing my husband's face. His eyes avoided mine during dinner. Our conversations became functional. Groceries, Emily's soccer schedule, utility bills. Sex became rare, then perfunctory, then non-existent. When I reached for him in bed, he was already turning away, murmuring about early meetings or headaches. "Is everything okay?" I asked one night as he checked his phone for the 5th time during our anniversary dinner. The restaurant was one of those upscale places with dim lighting and waiters who never let your water glass empty. I'd spent hours getting ready, hoping to reconnect. "Yeah, just work stuff." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The Johnson account is stressing everyone out." I nodded and sipped my wine, pretending to believe him. The Johnson account had been successfully closed 3 weeks ago. I knew because I'd sent flowers to his office to celebrate. My friend Diane suggested I was overreacting. "All marriages go through phases," she said over coffee the next day. Mark and I barely spoke for all of 2018. But Diane hadn't seen the way James's face softened when his phone buzzed with certain messages. She hadn't noticed how he suddenly cared about his appearance, buying new cologne and shirts without me asking. After years of comfortable neglect, my husband was now ironing his own clothes. One Tuesday afternoon, I picked Emily up from school early. She had a dentist appointment, and found myself with an hour to kill before I needed to be home. Without really planning it, I drove to James's office. I told myself I'd surprise him, maybe suggest a quick coffee in the lobby. We hadn't done something spontaneous in ages. The receptionist, Kimberly, looked startled when I asked for him. "Oh, Mr. Collins isn't in today. He called this morning saying he was working from home." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "From home? Are you sure?" She checked her computer. "Yes, that's what his calendar says. Working from home all day." I thanked her and walked out, my legs moving automatically while my mind raced. James had kissed me goodbye that morning, briefcase in hand, talking about meetings until late. He'd texted at lunch about how boring the quarterly review was. All lies. I sat in my car, staring at our family photo on the dashboard. James, Emily, and me at the beach last summer, all sunburned smiles and sandy feet. Was I losing my mind? Or was I losing my husband? That night, after Emily was asleep, I waited until James was in the shower. I never thought I'd be this person, the wife who snoops through her husband's things. But fear makes us do things we never imagined. His phone was on the nightstand, face down. For once, he'd forgotten to take it with him. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was locked, of course. I tried his birthday. Nothing. Our anniversary. Nothing. Emily's birthday. The 4 digits that unlocked everything. The messages were right there. No digging required. Her name was Natalie. She worked in his department. There were hundreds of texts going back months. I only needed to read a few to understand everything. "Miss you already. Last night was amazing. When can you get away again?" The shower stopped running. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it and slipped under the covers, turning away from his side of the bed. I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing as the bathroom door opened. I wasn't ready to confront what I'd found. Not yet. First, I needed a plan. Sleep evaded me that night, and every night that followed. I'd lie awake watching James breathe, wondering how someone could share your bed for 15 years and still be a complete mystery. During the day, I functioned on autopilot, making Emily's lunches, attending PTA meetings, smiling at neighbors. But inside, I was calculating, watching, gathering evidence I never wanted to find. 3 days after discovering the texts, I created a new email address and contacted a private investigator. His name was Elliot, and he spoke with the detached efficiency of someone who had seen too many marriages dissolve from the lens of a telephoto camera. Standard package is 2 weeks of surveillance, he explained. Photos, locations, timestamps, everything admissible in court, if it comes to that. The words "in court" made my stomach lurch. Was that where we were headed? I still hadn't confronted James. Each morning he kissed me goodbye. Each evening he came home with stories about his day, all while I knew he was weaving fabrications as intricate as spider silk. I don't know if I want... I started. Most people don't, Elliot interrupted gently. But they all say they're glad they knew for sure, one way or another. So I hired him, paying the retainer from a personal account James knew nothing about. Money I'd been saving for a surprise trip to Maine for our upcoming anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. A week passed. James mentioned a 2-day marketing conference in Boston. Just an overnight thing, he said casually over dinner. Back before you know it. I nodded, pushing peas around my plate. When do you leave? Thursday morning. Back Friday evening. He reached for my hand across the table. Everything okay? You seem distant lately. The tenderness in his voice almost broke me. How dare he act concerned while planning another rendezvous? I slipped my hand away to refill my wine glass. Just tired. Work's been hectic. Emily piped up from her end of the table. Can we have pizza while Dad's gone? And watch movies in your bed? Absolutely, I promised, grateful for the distraction. It'll be girls' night. That night, I emailed Elliot with the conference details. His response was immediate. On it, Thursday arrived, and James left with his overnight bag and a lingering kiss that felt like acid on my lips. I dropped Emily at school and went to work, where I stared blankly at spreadsheets while imagining James and Natalie checking into some boutique hotel, laughing about how easily I'd been fooled. Elliot's first update came at 2 p.m. A simple text. Subject did not go to conference location. Currently at Hotel Indigo, downtown. Attached was a photo of James entering the lobby, roller bag in hand. He wore the blue tie I'd given him for Christmas. The second update arrived at 6 p.m. Another text, another photo. James and a woman with copper hair entering the hotel restaurant. His hand rested on the small of her back in that intimate way he used to touch me. They were laughing. I recognized her immediately. Natalie from accounting. I'd met her at the company Christmas party just months ago, where she'd complimented my earrings and asked how long James and I had been married. 15 years, I'd told her proudly. High school sweethearts. She'd smiled and said we were lucky to have found each other so young. Now I stared at her hand on my husband's arm, at the way he leaned toward her as if she were gravity itself. The final photo was the worst. James kissing her in the elevator, her back against the wall, his hands in her hair. The timestamp showed 9:42 p.m. I sat on my bathroom floor that night, laptop open, staring at the evidence of my collapsing marriage. Emily was asleep in my bed as promised, our movie marathon having ended hours ago. The house was silent except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my world imploding. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Conference going well. Miss you both. Sleep tight. I laughed until I cried, then cried until I couldn't breathe. The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. When I could finally stand again, I washed my face and looked in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, but something had changed in them. The shock was fading, replaced by something harder and more determined. I thought about calling my sister or my best friend, but decided against it. This pain was still too raw, too personal to share. Instead, I opened my laptop again and did something I never thought I would. I researched divorce attorneys. I checked our finances. I made lists of assets, debts, and accounts. As the night deepened around me, my path forward became increasingly clear. James would return tomorrow evening, expecting everything to be as he left it. His comfortable life, his trusting wife, his perfect cover. But the woman who had waited for his texts, who had made excuses for his absences, who had doubted her own instincts, she was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone with evidence in her inbox and steel in her spine. I crawled into bed beside my sleeping daughter and finally closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreams. Friday stretched before me like an endless highway. I dropped Emily at my sister Kate's for a sleepover we'd arranged days earlier. Before I knew it would become the night everything changed. Kate noticed something was off, but I deflected her concerns with practiced ease. "Just tired from solo parenting while James is away," I said, kissing Emily goodbye. "Have fun, sweetie. I'll pick you up tomorrow." Back home, I printed the photos Elliot had sent, along with screenshots of text messages I'd managed to copy from James's phone over the past week. I arranged them neatly in a manila folder, then placed it on the coffee table in our living room. Next, I poured myself a glass of the expensive Cabernet James had been saving for a special occasion. If this wasn't special, what was? The house felt eerily quiet without Emily's constant motion and chatter. I walked through each room slowly, touching familiar objects. The chipped mug James drank from every morning, the framed photos from our honeymoon in Hawaii, Emily's artwork plastering the refrigerator. 15 years of life built together. And for what? To end on a Friday evening with evidence spread across our coffee table like the world's most depressing card game. I changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress I'd worn on our last anniversary. Not for him, for me. I needed armor for what was coming. The garage door rumbled open at 6:17 p.m. I sat perfectly still on the couch, hands folded in my lap like a patient schoolgirl. Keys jangled, footsteps approached. The door swung open. "Hey, I'm home," James called out, dropping his bag in the hallway. "Where's my welcome committee?" "In here," I answered, my voice steadier than I'd expected. He appeared in the doorway, still smiling from whatever happiness he'd found in another woman's arms. The smile faltered when he saw me sitting alone, dressed up with nowhere to go. "Where's Emily?" "At Kate's for the night." His eyes darted around the room, catching on the wine glass, the folder, my rigid posture. "Is everything okay? How was the conference?" I asked, ignoring his question. "Good. Productive." He loosened his tie, the blue one from the photos. "Lots of networking." "Networking?" I nodded slowly. "Is that what you call it now?" A flicker of something, fear, perhaps, crossed his face. "What's that supposed to mean?" I gestured to the folder on the table. "Why don't you have a look?" He hesitated, then crossed the room and sat on the edge of the armchair opposite me. When he opened the folder, his face drained of color, page after page of evidence. His betrayal documented in high-resolution color. "Lauren, I can explain." "Can you?" My voice remained calm, detached even to my own ears. "Can you explain why you've been fucking your coworker instead of attending the conference you said you were at? Can you explain the hundreds of text messages? The lies about working late? The sudden password on your phone?" He flinched at my language. I rarely swore, but I was past caring about propriety. "It's not what it looks like." He tried again. A laugh escaped me, harsh and unfamiliar. "It's exactly what it looks like, James. You're having an affair with Natalie from accounting. The same Natalie who asked me about our marriage at the Christmas party. The same Natalie who's 10 years younger than me and has never pushed a human being out of her body." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt to watch. It just happened. I didn't plan it. Things like this don't just happen. You made choices. Every text, every lie, every hotel room, those were all choices. I took a sip of wine. "How long?" "Lauren, how long?" He stared at the floor. 7 months. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 7 months. It had started right after my father died, when I was drowning in grief and barely functioning. When I needed my husband most, he'd been finding comfort elsewhere. "Do you love her?" The question surprised even me. I hadn't planned to ask it. "I don't know." At least he had the decency not to lie again. "Maybe. It's complicated." "No, taxes are complicated. Quantum physics is complicated. This is actually quite simple. You betrayed me, our daughter, our entire life together." His eyes finally met mine, brimming with tears I couldn't bring myself to care about. "What happens now?" I'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times since last night, but now that it was here, I felt strangely calm. Now you pack a bag and leave. I've already called a lawyer. You can expect paperwork next week. You're not even willing to try. 15 years, Lauren. Don't we deserve to at least attempt counseling? The audacity was breathtaking. You forfeited that option somewhere between hotel room kisses and lying to my face every day for 7 months. What about Emily? His voice cracked. You should have thought about Emily before you started sleeping with your coworker. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by his presence. She's at Kate's until tomorrow. You have until then to get your essential things. I'll arrange a time next week when you can get the rest while we're not here. He stood too, reaching for me. Please, let's just talk about this. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. We're done talking. The next conversation we have will be through lawyers. His face crumpled, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pain. Just a vast emptiness where my heart used to be. I walked to the stairs, pausing at the bottom step. One more thing, I said, without turning around. When you tell people why our marriage ended, I hope you have the courage to tell the truth. Don't make me the villain in your story. I climbed the stairs without waiting for his response. In our bedroom, now my bedroom, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sounds of my husband gathering his things. A drawer sliding open, footsteps across the hardwood, the jingle of car keys. The front door closed with a quiet click that somehow echoed through the entire house. And just like that, 15 years of marriage ended on a Friday evening in spring, with half a glass of wine still sitting on the coffee table and the smell of his cologne lingering in the air. I could finally breathe again. The hardest conversation of my life happened over pancakes. Emily had returned from Kate's full of stories about movie night and how her cousin Tyler had tried to eat an entire pizza by himself. Her chatter filled the kitchen as I flipped blueberry pancakes, nodding and smiling while my stomach twisted into knots. She hadn't noticed her father's car was missing yet. "Where's Dad?" she finally asked, mouthful of pancake. "Is he still sleeping?" I set my fork down carefully. "Actually, sweetie, Dad isn't here. He's staying somewhere else for a while." Her eyes, so much like James, widened. Like a vacation? Not exactly. I reached across the table for her small hand. "Your dad and I have decided we need to live apart." Emily stared at me, syrup dripping from her forgotten fork. "But why? Did you have a fight? How do you explain betrayal to a 10-year-old? How do you say, 'Your father chose another woman over us,' without crushing her innocence? Sometimes grown-ups realize they can't be married anymore," I said gently. "But that doesn't change how much we both love you." Her lip trembled. "Is he coming back?" "No, honey. He's not. But you'll still see him all the time." The words felt like glass in my throat. Did I do something wrong? Her voice sounded so small, so broken that I nearly came undone. I moved around the table and pulled her onto my lap, something I hadn't done since she decided she was too big last year. "Absolutely not. This has nothing to do with you. Dad and I made grown-up mistakes that have nothing to do with how amazing you are." She buried her face in my shoulder and sobbed. I held her, rocking slightly, letting her tears soak through my shirt while keeping my own at bay. I had to be strong for her, even as my heart shattered all over again. That night, after Emily had finally fallen asleep in my bed, James called. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice rough. "With Emily? How do you think it went?" "She's devastated." A long silence. "I want to see her." "Of course. She's your daughter. But you need to figure out what you're going to tell her when she asks why you left." "Lauren, Save it." I cut him off. "Just let me know when you want to pick her up. And James, don't you dare bring that woman around her. Not now, not ever." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking. The days that followed blurred together. Emily moved between sadness and anger like a pendulum. One moment she'd be sobbing in her room. The next, she'd refuse to speak about her father at all. She started having nightmares, crawling into my bed at 2 a.m. with tears on her cheeks. I'd hold her until she fell back asleep, then lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how we'd ever find normal again. James took her every weekend, returning her with McDonald's toys and stories about the aquarium or the park. He was trying, I'll give him that, to be super dad during his allotted time. But I was the one dealing with the homework meltdowns, the forgotten permission slips, the midnight tears. The daily grind of parenting fell squarely on my shoulders, while he got to be the fun weekend father. Friends rallied around us in those early weeks. Kate brought casseroles and took Emily for sleepovers when I needed space. My college roommate Tara showed up with wine and let me rant until my voice gave out. My neighbor Mrs. Peterson, a widow of 15 years, brought cookies and sage advice. The first year is the hardest. Then one day you realize you've gone a whole hour without thinking about him. My mother flew in from Phoenix, arriving with 2 suitcases and a determination to fix everything. "I never liked him," she announced while unpacking. "Too charming. Men that charming are always hiding something. Mom, you cried at our wedding. You called him the son you never had." She waved dismissively. I was younger then, less perceptive. Despite her revisionist history, her presence was a godsend. She took over cooking and laundry, drove Emily to soccer practice, and even found a support group for children of divorce at the community center. Her efficiency gave me space to breathe, to process, to begin the work of untangling myself from James. The divorce proceedings started with clinical precision. Assets divided, custody arranged. The house would be sold, the profits split. 15 years reduced to spreadsheets and legal documents. Our lawyer meetings were civil but frigid, each of us flanked by professionals who spoke about our life together as if it were a business being dissolved. 1 month after James left, I was sorting through the hall closet when I found it, a photo album from our honeymoon. Young, laughing faces stared back at me from sun-drenched Hawaiian beaches. His arms around my waist, my head on his shoulder. Strangers now, separated by time and betrayal. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear splashed onto the plastic-covered page. With shaking hands, I closed the album and placed it in the donation box. Some memories weren't worth keeping. 3 months into my new life as a single mother, I ran into them at Trader Joe's. I'd just turned down the frozen food aisle when I spotted them. James and Natalie, heads bent together over a shopping list, her hand casually resting on his arm. They looked like any normal couple debating ice cream flavors, not 2 people who had detonated my family. I froze, shopping cart half filled with Emily's favorite cereal and the ingredients for lasagna. My first instinct was to abandon everything and flee, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Pride, maybe, or the simple refusal to disrupt my life any further for their comfort. James saw me first. His eyes widened, and he nudged Natalie, who looked up with that deer-in-headlights expression I'd seen in the mirror too many times lately. They whispered to each other, clearly debating whether to approach or pretend they hadn't seen me. I made the decision for them. With a deep breath, I pushed my cart forward, nodding briefly as I passed. "James, Natalie, Lauren," James replied, his voice strained. "How are you?" "Managing," I said, reaching past them for a bag of frozen broccoli. "Emily's doing well in her summer reading program." An awkward silence stretched between us. Natalie shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by the nutrition label on a carton of ice cream. "That's great," James finally said. "She mentioned that when I had her last weekend. She's really enjoying those mystery books you got her." I nodded, desperately wanting this encounter to end but refusing to be the one who ran away. "Well, I should get going. Dinner to make." As I turned to leave, Natalie spoke for the first time. "Lauren, I cut her off with a look that could have frozen the entire freezer section. "Don't. Whatever you're about to say, apology, explanation, justification, I don't want to hear it. Not here. Not ever." Her face flushed red. James put his arm around her shoulders protectively, a gesture that once would have gutted me but now just left me tired. "Goodbye," I said simply, and wheeled my cart away. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the tidal wave of emotion to hit me. But instead of pain or rage, I felt something unexpected: indifference. They were just 2 people buying groceries. Their happiness or misery had nothing to do with me anymore. That night, after Emily was asleep, I opened a bottle of wine and called Tara. "I saw them today," I told her. "James and the homewrecker in their natural habitat, the frozen food aisle." "Oh God," Tara gasped. "What happened? Did you make a scene?" Please tell me you accidentally ran over her foot with your cart. I laughed, surprising myself. Nothing that dramatic. I just said hello and kept moving. That's mature of you. Don't sound so disappointed. I took a sip of wine. The weird thing is, I didn't feel much of anything. Is that normal? Shouldn't I have wanted to scream or cry or something? Honey, that's not weird. That's healing. Tara's voice softened. It means you're moving on. Moving on. The phrase followed me through the coming weeks, as summer faded into fall. Emily started 5th grade with a new backpack and a tentative excitement. The divorce papers were finalized with signatures and notary stamps. The house sold faster than expected, and I found a bright 2-bedroom apartment closer to Emily's school. Moving day arrived with unseasonably warm October sunshine. Friends showed up with coffee and donuts, loading boxes into rental trucks and helping arrange furniture in our new space. By evening, the essential rooms were set up, and Emily was already planning where her posters would go. After everyone left and Emily fell asleep in her new room, I sat on our small balcony with a glass of wine. The neighborhood was quiet, streetlights casting gentle pools of light on the sidewalk below. This place held no memories of James, no echoes of arguments in the kitchen or laughter in the living room. No ghosts lingered in these freshly painted walls. My phone buzzed with a text from David, Kate's brother who had helped with the move. Everything still working? No boxes falling over or pipes leaking? I smiled. David had been surprisingly present these past months, offering to fix Emily's bike, dropping off homemade bread, checking in with simple texts that asked nothing but offered quiet support. He was divorced himself, had been for 5 years, and never once offered platitudes about time healing all wounds. All good, I replied. Thanks again for today. Emily's already claiming, this place feels like home. Kids are resilient, he wrote back. So are their moms. I looked at those words for a long time, turning them over in my mind. Resilient. Was that what I was becoming? The woman who confronted her cheating husband, who told her daughter the hard truth, who nodded politely to her replacement in the grocery store. Was she resilient or just numb? But as I sat in the quiet of my new home, watching the stars appear one by one above unfamiliar trees, I realized there was a strength in me that hadn't been there before, a certainty about who I was and what I deserved that had emerged from the wreckage of my marriage like a seedling pushing through concrete. For the first time since James left, I didn't cry myself to sleep. Instead, I drifted off with the windows open, the cool autumn air washing over me like a promise of seasons changing. They say the first year is the hardest. The first Christmas, the first birthday, the first anniversary spent alone. Each milestone becomes a measuring stick for grief, a reminder of what was lost. But no one tells you about the unexpected freedom those firsts can bring, the chance to redefine traditions that no longer serve you. Our first Christmas post-divorce, Emily and I skipped the elaborate tree James had always insisted on, and instead decorated a small Norfolk pine that fit perfectly in our apartment window. We made paper chains and popcorn garlands while watching cheesy holiday movies in our pajamas. On Christmas morning, after opening presents, we spontaneously decided to volunteer at the local animal shelter. Walking dogs in the crisp winter air, hearing Emily's laughter as a golden retriever puppy covered her face in kisses. It wasn't the Christmas I'd imagined a year ago, but it held its own kind of magic. My birthday in February brought another unexpected gift. David invited Emily and me to dinner, insisting it wasn't a date, but rather a birthday celebration for a friend. Emily spent the evening charming him with stories about her science project, while I found myself laughing more than I had in months. When he walked us to our door afterward, he handed me a small package wrapped in simple blue paper. "Just something I thought you might like," he said, suddenly awkward. No pressure. Inside was a first edition of Jane Eyre, my favorite novel, something I'd mentioned in passing months ago. The thoughtfulness of it left me speechless. "Thank you," I finally managed. "This is perfect." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Happy birthday, Lauren." After he left, Emily looked at me with the unfiltered wisdom only children possess. I like David. He listens when people talk. I tucked the book carefully on my nightstand. Yes, he does. Spring arrived with a riot of cherry blossoms and the first major parenting crisis of my single motherhood. Emily's teacher called one afternoon, voice tight with concern. Emily got into a physical altercation with another student today. She's in the principal's office. My heart sank as I drove to the school, picturing my gentle daughter somehow transformed into a playground bully. The principal, Mrs. Chen, met me with a sympathetic expression that did nothing to calm my nerves. Emily punched a boy in her class, she explained. Apparently, he made some comments about her parents' divorce. Emily sat small and defiant in the too large chair, eyes red-rimmed but chin held high. He said Dad left because I was bad, she whispered when I knelt beside her. He said you weren't pretty enough to keep him. White-hot rage flashed through me, not at Emily, but at the cruelty of children who merely parroted their parents' gossip. At James, whose actions had made our daughter vulnerable to such wounds. At myself, for not being able to shield her from this pain. You know those things aren't true, right? I asked her, brushing hair from her tear-stained face. She nodded, but it still hurt. I pulled her into a fierce hug. I know, baby. I know. That night, after a serious discussion about why hitting wasn't the answer even when people said horrible things, I called James. Your daughter punched a kid today for talking about our divorce, I said without preamble. His sharp intake of breath carried through the phone. Is she okay? No, James. She's not okay. She's confused and hurt and angry. She needs both of us to help her through this. To his credit, he came over that same evening. We sat at my kitchen table, the new one I'd bought at IKEA, and assembled myself, and talked more honestly than we had in years about Emily's needs and how to better coordinate our parenting. For those 2 hours, we weren't wounded exes, but simply two people who loved the same child. As summer approached again, marking nearly a year since our separation, I found myself on the balcony one evening, scrolling through dating apps with Tara. She'd insisted it was time for me to get back out there, whatever that meant. What about this one? She asked, pointing to a bearded man holding a fish. He likes hiking. I laughed. Every man on here likes hiking and has at least one fish picture. Fine. What about him? Professor at the community college. Reads actual books. I glanced at the profile, then at the text that had just lit up my phone. David asking if Emily and I wanted to join him for the outdoor movie in the park that weekend. I think, I said slowly, setting down my phone. I might not need a nap right now. Tara followed my gaze and grinned. About time you noticed what's been right in front of you. The anniversary of James moving out arrived without the devastation I'd feared. Instead, I took the day off work and treated myself to a solo hike in the state park, something I'd always wanted to do but had never prioritized. Standing on an overlook, watching hawks circle lazily in the summer sky, I realized how much had changed in a year. The woman who had sat frozen on her bathroom floor staring at photos of her husband's betrayal wouldn't recognize the one who now stood with mud on her boots and the sun on her face. That woman had defined herself primarily as James's wife, measuring her worth against his approval. This woman, the one who had assembled furniture alone, navigated parent-teacher conferences solo, and learned how to unclog a drain via YouTube, she belonged to herself. Her happiness wasn't dependent on someone else's fidelity. Her future wasn't limited by someone else's choices. As I headed back down the trail, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Dad says I can get my ears pierced if you say it's okay. I smiled, typing back. Let's talk about it when I get home. Another first. Parenting decisions that didn't dissolve into arguments about who was being too strict or too lenient. Just two separate parents doing their best for the child they shared. The path ahead wasn't perfectly clear. There would be more challenges, more firsts, more moments when the weight of single parenthood would feel overwhelming. But as I drove home through the golden afternoon light, windows down and music playing, I felt something I hadn't expected to find in the aftermath of betrayal. Possibility. Not just of surviving, but of thriving in this life I was rebuilding, one day at a time.